Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we begin a great adventure. Does anyone know when we started the first canto this time? How long ago that was? The keeper of the Akashic records. So, Dravida Prabhu, the referee, how do I proceed?
You have to don't read the entire summary of the 10th canto.
I'm not going to do that, but I will read a couple of sentences from that. I looked at that and I said, oh yeah, that's, be fasting until lunch. It'll be wonderful, but we'll be fasting. So do I read the chapter summary first and then do the verse, or do I go back and do that?
No, let's read the chapter.
As ordered. So I do want to share what Srila Prabhupada says about the first chapter. Is this something Srila Prabhupada composed? The summary of the 10th canto? Of the 10th canto.
He did the summary of the 10th canon. The question was whether he wrote it or he had one of his editors write it.
Well, that was, yeah, I mean, that's essentially my question. And I thought as senior BBT editor, you might be privy. So I want to share, it's just one sentence from the summary of the 10th canto. This is an extensive summary. Well, it's a very brief summary, but because there are 90 chapters, it's long. So Srila Prabhupada there, or whoever wrote it there, describes the first chapter, which has 69 verses, describes Mahārāja Parīkṣit's eagerness to learn about the incarnation of Lord Kṛṣṇa, and it also tells how Kṛṣṇa killed the 6 sons of Devaki because of his fear of being killed by her 8th child. Okay. And this is the chapter summary for chapter 1. The summary of the first chapter is as follows. This chapter describes how Kṛṣṇa, frightened by hearing an omen about his being killed by the 8th son of Devaki, killed Devaki's sons one after another. When Śukadeva Gosvāmī finished describing the dynasty of Yadu, as well as the dynasties of the moon god and sun god, Mahārāja Parīkṣit requested him to describe Lord Kṛṣṇa, who appeared with Baladeva in the Yadu dynasty, and how Kṛṣṇa performed his activities within this world. Kṛṣṇa is transcendental, the king said, and therefore to understand his activities is the occupation of liberated persons. Hearing of Kṛṣṇa Lila is the boat by which to achieve the ultimate goal of life, which we enthusiastically declare when at the end of our recitation of the 10 offenses is? Okay, we're doing it out of context, so no one remembers that. Krishna Prema! Everybody, anyway, it's a big cheer at the end. It's always interesting. Except for an animal killer or one who is following a policy of suicide, every intelligent person must strive to understand Krishna and his activities. Krishna was the only worshipable deity for the Pandavas. When Mahārāja Parīkṣit was in the womb of his mother Uttara, Krishna saved him from the attack of the Brahma Shastra. Now, Mahārāja Parīkṣit asked Śukadeva Gosvāmī how his lordship Baladev, the son of Rohini, could have appeared in the womb of Devaki. Why did Krishna transfer himself from Mathura to Vrindavan, King Parīkṣit asked, and how did he live there with his family members? What did Krishna do in Mathura and Vrindavan, and why did he kill his maternal uncle Kṛṣṇa? For how many years did Krishna reside in Dwaraka, and how many queens did he have? Mahārāja Parīkṣit asked Śukadeva Gosvāmī all these questions. He also requested Śukadeva Gosvāmī to describe other activities of Krishna about which he could not inquire. When Śukadeva Gosvāmī began to speak about Krishna consciousness, Mahārāja Parīkṣit forgot the fatigue brought about by his fasting. Enthusiastic to describe Krishna, Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, like the waters of the Ganges, descriptions of the activities of Krishna can purify the entire universe. The speaker, the inquirer, and the audience all become purified. Once, When the entire world was overburdened by the increasing military power of demons in the form of kings, Mother Earth assumed the shape of a cow and approached Lord Brahma for relief. Sympathetic to Mother Earth's lamentation, Brahma, accompanied by Lord Shiva and other demigods, took the cow-shaped Mother Earth to the shore of the Milk Ocean, where he offered prayers to please Lord Vishnu, who lay there on an island in transcendental ecstasy. Brahma thereafter understood the advice of Mahavishnu, who informed him that he would appear on the surface of the earth to mitigate the burden created by the demons. The demigods, along with their wives, should appear there as associates of Lord Kṛṣṇa in the family of Yadu to increase the sons and grandsons in that dynasty. By the will of Lord Kṛṣṇa, Anantadeva would appear first as Balaram, and Krishna's potency, Yogamaya, would also appear. Brahma informed Mother Earth about all this, and then he returned to his own abode. After marrying Devaki, Vasudeva was returning home with her on a chariot driven by Kṛṣṇa, her brother, when an ominous voice addressed Kṛṣṇa, warning him that Devaki's 8th son would kill him. Upon hearing this omen, Kṛṣṇa was immediately ready to kill Devaki, but Vasudeva diplomatically began to instruct him. Vasudeva stressed that it would not be good for Kṛṣṇa to kill his younger sister, especially at the time of her marriage. Anyone who possesses a material body must die, Vasudeva advised him. Every living entity lives in a body for some time and then transmigrates to another body. But one is unfortunately misled into accepting the body as the soul. If a person, under this mistaken conception, wants to kill another body, he's condemned as hellish. Because Kṛṣṇa was not satisfied by Vasudeva's instructions, Vasudeva devised a plan. He offered to bring Kṛṣṇa all of Devaki's children so that Kṛṣṇa could kill them. Why then should Kṛṣṇa kill Devaki now? Kṛṣṇa was satisfied by this proposal. In due course of time, when Devaki gave birth to a child, Vasudeva brought the newborn baby to Kṛṣṇa, who, upon seeing Vasudeva's magnanimity, was struck with wonder. When Vasudeva gave Kṛṣṇa the child, Kṛṣṇa, showing some intelligence, said that since he was to be killed by the 8th child, why should he kill the first? Although Vasudeva did not trust him, Kṛṣṇa requested Vasudeva to take the child back. Later, however, when Narada approached Kṛṣṇa and disclosed to him that the demigods were appearing in the Yadu and Vrishni dynasties and conspiring to kill him, this is Narada Muni. He's always there to stir the pot. Kṛṣṇa decided to kill all the children born in these families, and he also decided that any child born from the womb of Devaki must be killed. Thus, he arrested and imprisoned both Devaki and Vasudeva and killed 6 of their sons, one after another. Narada had also informed Kṛṣṇa that in his previous birth, Kṛṣṇa was Kalanemi, a demon killed by Vishnu. Consequently, Kṛṣṇa became a great enemy to all the descendants of the Yadu Vangsha, the Yadu dynasty. He even arrested and imprisoned his own father, Ugrasena, for Kṛṣṇa wanted to enjoy the kingdom alone. Krishna has 3-fold pastimes: the Vraja Lila, Mathura Lila, and Dwaraka Lila. As already mentioned in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, there are 90 chapters which describe all these Leelas. That makes it appear that he actually did write that summary of the 10th canto, unless they edited that in. The first 4 chapters describe Brahma's prayers for the relief of the earth's burden, and they also describe the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chapters 5 through 39 recount Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. The 40th chapter describes how Krishna enjoyed in the water of the Jamuna and how Akrura offered prayers. Chapters 41 through 51, 11 chapters, tell of Krishna's pastimes in Mathura, and chapters 52 through 90, 39 chapters, relate Krishna's pastimes in Dwaraka. Chapters 29 through 33 describe Krishna's dancing with the gopis, known as the Rasa Lila. Therefore, these 5 chapters are known as Rasa Panchadhyaya. The 47th chapter of the 10th canto is a description known as the Brahmara Gita. Text 1. Everyone ready? Seat belts, please. Shri Rajovacha Katita Vangsha Vistaro Katito Vangsha Vistaro Bhavata Somasuryayo Bhavata Somasuryayo Ragyam Chobhaya Vangshayana Vangsha. Okay, I'm going to try that one again. Ragyam Chobhaya Vangshanam Charitam Paramadbhutam. Because of time, and because this is understood, maybe you all can continue chanting. It's not terribly challenging. Others, please. Vaishnavis. Anyone online? Word to word. Sri Raja Uvacha. King Parīkṣit said, Katita has already been described. Vangsha Vistara, a broad description of the dynasties. Bhavata, your Lord, by your lordship. Somasureyo, of the moon god and the sun god. Ragyam, of the kings. Cha, and Abhaya, both. Vangshanam, of the members of the dynasty. Charitam, the character. Parama, exalted. Adbhutam, and wonderful. King Parīkṣit said, "My dear Lord," translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. King Parīkṣit said, "My dear Lord, you have elaborately described the dynasties of both the moon god and the sun god with the exalted and wonderful character of their kings." Responsively, please. King Parīkṣit said, "My dear Lord, you have elaborately described the dynasties of both the moon god and the sun god with the exalted and wonderful character of their kings." Srila Prabhupada's purport. At the end of the 9th canto, 24th chapter, Śukadeva Gosvāmī summarized the activities of Kṛṣṇa. He spoke of how Kṛṣṇa had personally appeared to reduce the burden on the earth, and how he had manifested his pastimes as a householder, and how soon after his birth he had transferred himself to his Vrajabhumi Leela. Parīkṣit Mahārāja, being naturally a devotee of Kṛṣṇa, wanted to hear more about Lord Kṛṣṇa. Therefore, to encourage Śukadeva Gosvāmī to continue speaking about Kṛṣṇa and give further details, he thanked Śukadeva Gosvāmī for having described activities of Kṛṣṇa in brief. Śukadeva Gosvāmī had said, Jato gata pitri grahad vrajam ediharto hatva ripum shuta shatani krito dudara utpadyateshu purushakratubi samije atmanamatma nigamam pratayam janeshu. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Kṛṣṇa, known as Leela Purushottama, appeared as the son of Vasudeva, but immediately left his father's home and went to Vrindavan to expand his loving relationships with his confidential devotees. In Vrindavan, the Lord killed many demons, and afterwards he returned to Dwaraka, where, according to Vedic principles, he married many wives, who were the best of women, and begot through them hundreds of sons, and performed sacrifices for his own worship to establish the principles of householder life. The Yadu dynasty belonged to the family descending from Soma, the moon god. Although the planetary systems are so arranged that the sun comes first, before the moon, Parīkṣit Mahārāja gave more respect to the dynasty of the moon god, the Soma Vangsha, because in the Yadava dynasty descending from the moon, Kṛṣṇa had appeared. There are two different Kshatriya families of the royal order, one descending from the king of the moon planet, and the other descending from the king of the sun. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears, he generally appears in a Kshatriya family, because he comes to establish religious principles in the life of righteousness. According to the Vedic system, the Kshatriya family is the protector of the human race. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared as Lord Ramchandra, he appeared in the Surya Vangsha, the family descending from the sun god, And when he appeared as Lord Krishna, he did so in the Yadu dynasty, or the Yadu Vangsha, whose descent was from the moon god. In the 9th canto, 24th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a long list of the kings of the Yadu Vangsha. All the kings in both the Soma Vangsha and the Surya Vangsha were great and powerful, and Mahārāja Parīkṣit praised them very highly. Ragyam Chobhaya Vangshanam Charitam Paramadbhutam. Nonetheless, he wanted to hear more about the Soma Vangsha, because that was the dynasty in which Krishna had appeared. The supreme abode of the personality of Godhead Krishna is described in the Brahma Samhita as the abode of Chintamani. Chintamani prakara sadmasu kalpa vriksha lakshavriteshu surabhirabhipalayantam. The Vrindavan Dham on this earth is a replica of that same abode. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, in the spiritual sky there is another eternal nature, transcendental to manifested and unmanifested matter. The manifested world can be seen in the form of many stars and planets, such as the sun and the moon. But beyond this is the unmanifested, which is imperceptible to those who are embodied. And beyond this manifested matter is the spiritual kingdom. And beyond this unmanifested matter is the spiritual kingdom, which is described in Bhagavad Gita as supreme and eternal. That kingdom is never annihilated. Although material nature is subject to repeated creation and annihilation, that spiritual nature remains as it is eternally. In the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that spiritual nature, the spiritual world, is described as Vrindavan, Goloka Vrindavan, or Brajadhama. The elaborate description of the above-mentioned shloka from the 9th canto, Jatagata Pitrigrahad, will be found here in the 10th canto. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukhaṁ Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamahang Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine Naste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyabadi Paschatya Deshatarine Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Chapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Translation again. King Parīkṣit said, "My dear Lord, you have elaborately described the dynasties of both the moon god and the sun god with the exalted and wonderful character of their kings." So now we have arrived. Srila Prabhupada describes in a number of places how the different cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam can be compared to different parts of the Lord's body. And he says that we should begin hearing about the Lord, we should begin meditating on the Lord with the lotus feet. That is comprised of the first and second cantos of the Bhagavatam. Then you have his calves, then his thighs, then his waist, his abdomen, his chest, his neck, and then the Lord's smiling face, which we see especially in those 29th through 33rd chapters of the 10th canto. But the 10th canto can be said to be the Lord's face. So we begin. The Bhagavatam is presented in a way that systematically purifies the heart of different misgivings, misapprehensions, and misconceptions, so that we can actually appreciate the wonderful transcendental nature of Krishna's pastimes. Paneshwari Lakshmi Mataji pointed this out the other day, that first of all, we need to understand who Krishna is ontologically. He's the seed of everything, the source of it. He's the absolute truth. Everything comes from him, and everything is meant for him. And when we appreciate that, when all the different layers of contamination from our long sojourn through the material world, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Ajiv, when we become very fortunate after going through not just a universe, but moving through many bodies, through many universes, over many kalpas, over many complete cycles of universal time. When someone becomes very fortunate, then, by the grace of Krishna and by the grace of the Vaishnavas, especially the spiritual master, one gets that seed of devotional service planted in their heart. Bhaktya sanjataye bhaktya, as we mentioned the other day. That bhakti comes from bhakti. We get bhakti from those who carry her in their hearts, from the bhaktas. The inclination for bhakti is inherent in the soul, but in an unmanifest way. And it becomes manifest when it's nourished by the association of devotees. And a big characteristic of that company of devotees is Matchita Madgata Prana Bodhayanta Parasparam Katayantas Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Cha Ramanti Cha. They get their satisfaction, they get their pleasure by sitting together and discussing the different characteristics and activities, the different forms, the transcendental forms that the Lord shows in this world, especially his pastimes, his original pastimes as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, particularly his pastimes in Brajabhumi. So I remember, when I first started associating with the devotees in 1969 and 1970. I moved into the temple mid-March, I guess, of 1970, a few days before Gaur Purnima. And all we had, the only Bhagavatam we had access to, was the first canto. And we had the abridged Bhagavad Gita as it is, and Ishopanishad and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Then in June of 1970, this amazing thing happened. The BBT published The Nectar of Devotion. This is a huge, huge thing. And then that summer, maybe toward the end of the summer, late August, early September, the BBT published the first volume of Krishna book, which was completely mind-blowing. With the Nectar of Devotion and the Krishna book, which covers Krishna's pastimes through Mathura, the Krishna book was originally published in 2 volumes. Then we had some access to understanding Krishna. But before that, we'd been pretty well steeped in these many chapters of the first canto. And Srila Prabhupada says that when we actually realize Krishna's lotus feet, then that dissipates all doubt and all fear. That fearlessness, that's the hallmark, the special hallmark of the sannyasa ashram, that fearlessness. Oh, and it happens to be my middle name, something I hope to live up to someday. So by, Srila Prabhupada brought us, although we are supposed to proceed systematically, progressively through the different limbs of the Lord, Srila Prabhupada gave us the 10th canto and the Nectar of Devotion as perhaps a kind of emergency measure. There's a letter from Rameshwar where Srila Prabhupada is said to have explained that he wrote the Kṛṣṇa book when he did, because there was a chance that he may not be able to get to or finish the 10th canto. So here we are on the verge of this, and we've come to this point. Just as in Lord Chaitanya's conversation with Ramananda Rai in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya asked Ramananda to please explain what the ultimate goal of life is with scriptural support. So Ramananda proceeded through different shastric things, citing different scriptures, including Bhagavad Gita, and Lord Chaitanya dismissed those things as being external to the real point. Abhaya. Can you go a little further? And then he got to pure devotional service. Pure devotional service, which means devotional service free from, as Rupa Goswami says, anyabi lashita shunyam jnana karmadyanavritam. Completely free from the striving for the kind of transcendental knowledge that gives us moksha in the form of sayujya mukti. And anything else, everything else. And then Lord Chaitanya said, oh, nice. Ehohoi. And then he said, and a little more. And then he got to servitorship. The next he talked about servitorship, a sense of servitorship to the Supreme Lord. Dasyarati, or in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's described as Priti Rasa. And Lord Chaitanya said, ooh, nice. A little more. And then he got to Sakyarati. And the Lord said, now we're talking. Now we've got something to talk about. Now we're talking about now we're talking about an intimate relationship with the Supreme Lord. When he got to pure devotional service, and then, fine, and then spontaneous devotional service is eho uttam. And then a little more. Can we go further? And so this is kind of where we are now in the 10th canto. We've gone through all this presentation of different kinds of understanding through these different leelas, and which are described elsewhere in other Puranas as well. But the way they're presented in Srimad Bhagavatam all point right here, right to the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And in these 90 chapters, the ultimate in spiritual realization is described, especially once we get to the Rasa Panchadhyaya, those 5 chapters describing Krishna's rasa dance. We find a very intimate understanding. You think, Krishna practically says, buckle up at the end of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, right? He says, we've talked about so many different kinds of confidential knowledge. Now I'm going to give you the most secret of all secrets. So pay attention. Please pay attention. And then what does he say? Just love me. Give your everything to me. And don't worry about anything else, because I've got it covered. I do, after all, have that power. So beginning there, sarva dharman parityajya, again, completely rejecting, not just rejecting, completely rejecting any conventional sense of Dharma, including all four of the great values, the great attainments, the great goals of human life: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha Vancha. They're rejected as Kaitava Dharma, cheating religion. Not just sort of kind of like conventional religion as we see at the end of the Gita, but this is cheating religion. Why? Because these are about me. These are about my virtue, my material progress, my pleasure, my freedom. So at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, we hear, okay, for those who've actually been able to accomplish this, Dharma Prochita Kaitavatra, those who've completely rejected, not just rejected, but Praujita, completely rejected all kinds of cheating Dharma, all kinds of selfish, self-centered Dharma. Now we've got something to talk about. And so let's get ready. And he moves us through this progressively nectarian text. And we get to the 5th chapter, and Narada Muni kind of convinces Vyasadeva that everything else that he's done up to this point is compared to, anyone remember? Yeah, the dump. Place of pilgrimage for crows. And he's characterized it by a very strong adjective. Anyone remember that one? Jugupsitam, thank you. At least by comparison with what he needs to do now in order to relieve him of the depression that he had sunk into, that Srila Vyasadeva, the literary incarnation, after compiling the Vedas, the Puranas, the Itihasas, and everything, still he felt something was missing. Still, he felt there was maybe a God-shaped hole in his heart. Even after doing all that, Narada Muni described it as rubbish. Disgusting rubbish. So now we get to the real point, and King Parīkṣit is setting himself up. We'll see in tomorrow's verse. Tomorrow's Dravida? Mondays? All right. I am going to be up for that one. Because he's setting up a question. Now tell me about Kṛṣṇa. Now we've gone through all this stuff. And then, as Srila Prabhupada points out, following Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Jiva Goswami, and Sanatana Goswami, he points out, he puts the moon dynasty before the sun dynasty, because that's the dynasty that Kṛṣṇa appeared in. And with Kṛṣṇa and Ramchandra, we get a little sweetness. There's not so much sweetness in all these other leelas that we've seen. So, I mean, some of this stuff that we've read in some of these later chapters of the 9th canto, not so sweet. A little uncomfortable even to discuss, even in the intimate company of devotees. But now we're come to the nectar. Now we've come to the real juice. This is the stuff that will get us drunk, make us pass out, until we get up again and belly up for another draft. So we keep coming, but now we've got, this is the good stuff. I remember when I applied for graduate school at San Diego State University, you have to have a statement of why you want to be admitted to for me, it was the master's program in English at SDSU. And I said, well, I've gotten a pretty good taste in my undergraduate English classes. Now I'm ready for the good stuff. They liked that, apparently. So now it's time for the really, really good stuff. And we are going to find ourselves immersed for the next very long time in progressively sweet, progressively thick nectar. Okay, I'll stop there and entertain any discussion. Questions, comments, corrections? I see those coming.
Do you know how the moon and sun dynasty started in this earth planet? Who was the first descendant of them? And how that happened? He had a, how that happened?
I'm going through my files, but I'm not a very organized person, so I'm not sure. I can't find them. I don't know offhand. That sounds like, here it is, the first question. Already I've got homework. This is my this is my reward for having given, whatever it is, 7,000 people so much homework over the years when I was teaching. Thank you. That'll keep me out of trouble anyway. That's a really good research project. I remember years ago, several decades ago, they had a Back to Godhead article. Some girl from an Indo-American family, wasn't it? Put together kind of like the genealogy that we see in the 9th canto of the Yadu dynasty in the 9th canto. And it's quite a task for, I think, she was probably a teenage girl, probably even began it as a preteen. And it, I'm guessing that it took her some time to pull that all together. And it was really nice. And it's really nice to kind of see that stuff, especially for people with a little right brain inclination, to kind of see things presented graphically like that. It presents us a picture. Just like, nowadays, nowadays it's a real task to teach children to read time on an analog clock, because they're used to seeing digital clocks. Even in their homes, there may be, digital clock, and their watches are certainly digital or whatever. And part of the cognitive tests to see if you're beginning, real serious cognitive decline is they ask you to draw the face of a clock and represent a certain particular time or something like that, 10 minutes after 11 or something like that, to see if you can trace that out. So that kind of graphic presentation is helpful to a lot of people. So I'm going to take that seriously. I'm going to make a note as soon as we're done and put that on my list of tarea. Anything else, maybe less challenging?
Yeah, I have a question.
Prabhu.
Right.
Let me just ask, this is a real quick one, Maitreya. I remember when I was 6, 7 years old, in first grade, second grade, learning to read. And it was a whole thing of, sounding it out, finding out what each letter sounds like, and then sound out the letter. And that seemed to work nicely. That was the thing. But then I understand, and you can probably confirm since you were a teacher, that they moved away from that, and they had the people recognizing whole words. It was like, rather than the syllable by syllable and things like that. And I noticed that as my days in ISKCON piled up, and we get new people joining and everything, that they had more trouble with the transliteration, which is very much syllable by syllable, knowing what sounds and putting it together. And I think, and I always say, well, maybe it's because they're trying to read it like they learned English, but you can't do that it doesn't work that way. So I was wondering if you ever had that kind of thought, when you see, because you and I, like these verses, some of you heard me chanting, it's all sounded out, syllable by syllable and letter by letter. And there's no silent letters, really, it's all, everything counts, So I was wondering, because of course 10th canto is filled with all these prayers of the gopis, there's a lot of far out meters and verses. So it's for me, that's going to be a large part of the nectar.
Yeah, we see it at the end of the 9th canto. It builds up, and we've got several verses in a row in, I think it's Shardula Vikrititam,
Yes, Govinda, Govinda Prad. Yeah.
And which is this very powerful chanda or meter. Shardula Vikriditam, the prancing of a playful tiger. You know, the playful prancing of a tiger. It's like, this is heavy. This is heavy stuff. And you can hear the movement in that. And then now we've come back to King Parikshit's questions, which is back in Tristub. That's an interesting question as well. And I hadn't thought of that. I know that the teaching of reading, there are different ideas about how to teach reading. One is this kind of the phonics, one syllable at a time. When I started our Gurukula in Honolulu in the late 70s, the trend in ISKCON was to use a series called Let's Read, which begins with very simple monosyllabic words, and then gradually progresses. And I remember what was first grade, Dick and Jane, right?
Oh, yeah.
But they were we had two-syllable words because Sally was one of the kids. We had Dick and Jane, but their little sister was Sally. And we had these consonant blends as well. See Spot run. See Dick, see Dick chase Jane or whatever, Yeah. And so that was a little more than we started the kids with in the Gurukulas with the Let's Read series. I think part of it is that folks just don't. I hate to say this. I've just got my octogenarian life is just around the corner, a year and a couple months away. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but I think them young folks just don't read as much as they used to. I think that might be part of it. English speakers have maybe they find some relief once they figure out the how to use the diacritic marks and things like that with Sanskrit, because, as you say, there's only one way to pronounce a character and only one way to write a sound in Sanskrit, as in most alphabetic languages. English, I came up with when I was teaching. I shared with my students a technical term that describes English spelling, and that is screwy. Sometimes there's just, there's no sense to it. So yeah, it's something. It just takes practice. We make progress by practicing. That's a good question. Maharaj.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
For Spanish-speaking people, actually it's easier to pronounce the Sanskrit because
I was thinking that.
The vocals are always the same as in the Spanish, Like in U is always U, in E is always an E, in A is always an A, for example. And I is always an E.
Yeah.
They don't change. In English, they don't change. They change all the time depending on the on the word. It reminds me, pastime of Prabhupada during a Guru Puja, the Kirtan leader was saying, Shri Garu Karuna Sindhu. Prabhupada later told him, Garu means a cow. The Guru is not a cow. Because they sometimes pronounce it as an A. Isn't? So it happened that in South America, I travel all the time there, devotees, they pronounce Kantimala as Kuntimala. Why? Because an English-speaking devotee wrote Kantimala with like Queen Kunti. So I have to correct all over those countries to say Kantimala, not Kunti. Kunti is Queen Kunti. I have to clarify.
Even in the U.S. in the early 70s,
yeah,
you would often hear devotees talk about Kuntimala.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Because somebody had the idea to write it as Kunti, as Queen Kunti.
Yeah,
and also,
Spanish,
also in the prayer to Prabhupada, we say Namaste Saraswati Deve, isn't? But actually it is Namaste Saraswate.
Saraswati.
Because
Devi,
for us, an E is always, but actually in Sanskrit it's an A, not an E.
Yeah.
It sounds A. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's also the possessive case. Prabhupada is a disciple of Saraswati, therefore
Yeah.
Saraswati.
Yeah, correct.
In English, U can be long or short, right? It can be U or And I've sometimes guessed probably the most common vowel sound in the English, in American English anyway, the schwa, which is But in Spanish, as in Sanskrit, the U is always pronounced U. The only question is it U or U?
Yeah.
Is it weak or strong, short or long? That we learn as well eventually. Yeah. These linguistic things, it's real easy to get me down one of those rabbit holes. Let's see what Maitreya has, though.
Okay, good, Maitreya.
Well, my question was, I was going to ask, we've read this about these dynasties of Krishna conscious kings. It's just so marvelous to consider that, generation after generation, the kings, the rulers that take pride in being Krishna conscious and helping their citizens go back to Godhead. And then Krishna appears in one of these dynasties, and then bam, Kali Yuga, and everything gets blown to pieces. And many times I've been asked on preaching, why does God allow the Kali Yuga to exist?
Well, that's like the variation of the problem of evil.
I was just going to say, it's a good question. And when someone comes up with an answer that satisfies at least the broad majority of people, I'll be glad to hear it. Yeah, it's, what can we do? That's how it is. That's how the material world is made. It runs in these cycles. However, the good thing about Kali Yuga is that we have those pastimes, especially Krishna's pastimes, to reflect on, to purify us by hearing and chanting. Dravida Prabhu?
One final note. As we go through and read the 10th canto, something will come up, as it has already in the introduction, and that is that Kṛṣṇa and Devaki were brother and sister. Now, this is a whole thing with how cousins are. I looked at the Sanskrit. It says Svasra. Svasra is a sister, but Devaki's father was Devaka. Kṛṣṇa's father was Ugrasena. Ugrasena and Devaka were brothers, and this makes them cousins. So you have this brother, sister, cousin. And that's the same thing with the Pandavas, cousin brothers.
Yep.
Right. So that just be aware of that as we go through, because that's a convention in the Bhagavatam.
This is it's a little different culture, and it acknowledges that close relationship that I've pointed out quite often. The first verse of Bhagavad Gita, very first verse of Bhagavad Gita, we're set up for trouble because these guys leading leading armies on either side of the battlefield, they're first cousins, and except for brother and sister, in my experiences, I'm still friends with my first cousins. Especially my first cousins from Lompoc. We still hang out together on Facebook or something, and we all still like each other. But despite that, as Srila Prabhupada said in a letter to me, they are all one family. I guess I forgot to turn this thing off. Despite the fact that they're all one family, Dhritarashtra, under the influence of his wonderful son Duryodhana, has set up this us and them scenario. Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva. What are my boys and his boys going to do? And so therefore, we know there's only trouble, ahead. So that's it. In Hawaii, everybody's, if you're a peer, cousin. If they're older, aunties and uncles. I remember when we moved back to Hawaii, beginning of 2000, 2001, whenever it was. My former wife, who was at the time she was a pre-K teacher, when she was teaching here, she was Miss Susan. That's the convention in preschools here on the mainland. Miss Susan, Mr. Fred. Even though her two daughters were also, two grown daughters were also teaching at the same preschool, still Miss Susan. Go back to Hawaii, Auntie Susan. So they're everybody's ohana, everybody's family. And so the people who are older are all auntie and uncle, and the people who are around our same age or same social level they're all cousins. So that's that's something that can easily confuse, especially Americans. Okay, Krishna's waiting for us in yet another nectarian form, and I have someone coming to pick me up. So thank you all so much for your attention, for the great discussion, and there's going to be a lot more to come. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.